Good evening. The pot and psychedelic cult, whatever else it may be, is new and different. Unlike the nihilist beatniks of a few years back, today's LSD cultists say that they are turned on, not turned off. And if they talk of dropping out, they do so because they reject square society and claim they can build a better one. The psychedelic people are not in the historic pattern of dope addiction. Their drugs are so-called head drugs, ranging from such natural substances as marijuana and hashish to LSD and other artificial concoctions. These head drugs are not physically addictive, as are such body drugs as opium, heroin, and alcohol. An LSD enthusiast will inveigh against liquor as fervently as a 19th century temperance crusader. But some doctors and scientists claim that pot and LSD not only can lead to addictive drugs, but can be dangerous in themselves. In the next hour, we'll hear many sides of the controversy from 8 American cities. First, the city which has been identified with so many new movements and is now the preeminent home of the hippies, San Francisco.
Free! I'm free! We're not slaves! We're not slaves! I ain't got a dirty heart, I'm a clean bean!
Bless your dirty heart!
You talk about freedom with no responsibility! You talk about love with no obligation!
When you get fined, you'll turn on when you get fined. You get Jesus Christ and you'll turn on. You have turned society off and the world off. You need Christ and turn on. Thank God I've been turned off. I'm turned on and tuned in.
Hallelujah! Hallelujah!
In California, marijuana arrests among juveniles were up 140% last year. 25,000 adults were arrested for taking illegal drugs. Despite stricter enforcement, more rigid laws, and more rigid attitudes on the part of the courts, the use of drugs in California is increasing, both on and off the campus. In the past 7 years, marijuana arrests have increased by 248%. Dangerous drug arrests, including LSD, are up 84%. Why? More people are using drugs: LSD, marijuana, tobacco, and alcohol. Tobacco causes cancer. Alcohol, taken to excess, damages the brain and kidneys. They are legal, marijuana and LSD are not. I am Mel Wax, KQED in San Francisco. Here in San Francisco and in nearby Berkeley, in fraternity and sorority houses, marijuana is used both by conforming students and by student rebels. It is used by hippies in the Haight-Ashbury district. It is smoked in cigarettes, pipes, Turkish hookahs. It is sprinkled on salads, used as seasoning in soup, and mixed in chocolate chip cookies, even in the imposing Victorian homes of Pacific Heights.
Well, there's a physiological effect and there's a psychological effect. It seems to speed up their blood count. The pupil of the eye becomes dilated. The white of the eye becomes bloodshot. The person then becomes intoxicated. Their moods or their feelings are exaggerated. People that use marijuana have a tendency to be gregarious, and they do it in the company of each other.
Matthew O'Connor is a former undercover narcotics agent who is now in charge of the San Francisco office of the California State Bureau of Narcotics Enforcement.
The exaggerated mood of the gay atmosphere of the party seems to exist. If they have had any feeling at all toward nonconformity, it will manifest itself under the influence of the drug. So that if the group or if the individual feels a tendency to be promiscuous in sex, any reservations that they had about it are dropped while under the influence of the drug. This is particularly true in the case of marijuana. This is a kilo brick of marijuana. It's 2 2/10 pounds, and we were paying $225 in 1965 per kilo. This is a portion of a kilo now. We're paying $80 a kilo in 1967.
I can't see anything wrong with it at all. I know it's not physically harmful, and I never put the drug down. The drug, I couldn't call it a drug. It's just a weed because people call it a weed. It's put here on God's planet. It's put here for everybody.
There is a large supply, and it's the old situation of supply and demand. These are marijuana cigarettes. They're frequently referred to as joints, reefers, sticks.
Are you stealing my red fire?
They smoke it in a pipe. They also drink it as a tea. They wash the seeds and the stems and some of the marijuana material in wine and then consume the wine with a view that the alcohol has...
Gin? No, it's not in gin.
Washed the cannabinol, the cannabis resin, from the leaves and simply drink the wine for the same effect.
Mixing your media.
Marijuana is not a narcotic. Its basic effects are roughly comparable to the effects of average doses of alcohol. The reasons why so many people, young people, are turning to these drugs are in part the same reasons why so many people of the older generation turn to drugs: to escape, to find relaxation with alcohol, nicotine, sedatives, stimulants, tranquilizers, to relieve boredom and monotony, to socialize with other people.
Dr. Joel Ford has been director of the Center for Special Problems of the San Francisco Department of Public Health.
A reaction to the hypocrisy that they find in the older generation and in the American value structure, a feeling of alienation or disaffiliation from the broader society, and curiosity about the effects of drugs, often magical expectations that they will do something wonderful for them. We need to look at the roots of these problems, trying to understand why so many people in our society cannot exist without using drugs or feel that they can't.
The spread of marijuana has now convinced me that on first convictions they should serve some time in the county jail and then be placed on probation.
Francis McCarty is a Superior Court judge in San Francisco County.
From the ones I have seen, they are not from broken homes or deprived families or poverty families. They're from good families, from stable families. The last group, one of them was the son of a university professor. They're seeking something that they cannot find. What it is, I don't know. Basically, it is a medical problem as to the users. I'm not talking about sellers, rather than a penal one. And I think these people are sick, and I think these people should be treated compassionately and at the same time made to realize that these offenses, that is marijuana and hard narcotics, are felonies.
Forget those three. Have a do good time.
My criticism is that the penalties after the first offense are horrendous and far too severe. The penalties are greater for a second and third use of matters of this kind than rape and murder and other felonies. Let me give you an example. It's possible, given 2 misdemeanor convictions of possession of a marijuana cigarette in the past when it was a misdemeanor, for a person for the possession of 1 codeine pill without a prescription to serve 15 years in the state prison. The adult authority cannot parole him, and the court cannot grant probation. Now, when you figure the average second-degree murderer serves 5 years and 9 months, it doesn't seem to be a proper thing.
As far as our laws are concerned, I would think that we should do away with all penalties regarding marijuana.
Jerome H. Skolnick is a sociologist of law who teaches at the University of California and does research at the Center for the Study of Law and Society. He is the author of Justice Without Trial.
I think that one of the most serious problems in our criminal law is the attempt to control things that people do on a voluntary basis as a general matter, and this is especially true with respect to marijuana. as much of a failure as the attempt to control prohibition through to control the use of beverage alcohol through prohibition was. As far as our medical policy is concerned, I would say that the medical people in general, well, they vary, but let's take the best of them. They have tried to be objective. And their objectivity has, curiously enough, I think, led to a kind of falsification of the nature of marijuana use. They might describe the effects of marijuana use, for example, in such terms as adrenal activity or pulse rate or heart rate. Well, look at it this way. Suppose you had somebody who had never played a game of tennis, and he was asked what the effects of playing tennis were. Well, one way you could describe them is to say that after you play tennis, there's marked adrenal activity, there's a heightened pulse rate, there's facial flushing, there's sweating. Sometimes it's followed by dizziness and nausea, and sometimes even people die. That is to say, you could paint a horrible clinical portrait of a tennis game, which would not be false, you see, in the specific terms in which it's written, but it would be terribly misleading. And I think that much the same thing has been done with respect to the use of marijuana, for example.
This is liquid LSD, lysergic acid diethylamide. It has rather a blue cast to it. This is placed in either sugar cubes or tablets or capsules. These were seized here locally in the Bay Area. Here is a piece of candy. We assume that the LSD was put in liquid solution and drops were placed on a portion of the candy so that an individual would have pieces of candy in his pocket or sugar tablets. And the LSD would only be on one side and not discernible to the cursory examination by anybody, including a police officer.
There's a big difference between being inside and outside. Outside trips are sort of sufficient unto themselves. But when you're outside, I mean, you're sort of isolated on one hand, and you're part of something else which is altogether different. You're part of all the whole thing that's around you, particularly if you're someplace like up in the hills. And there was a heightened sense of color, sense of design, particularly design, picking up patterns in everything, picking up patterns in nature. Just the vaguest sense of being part of something that's a whole lot larger than one person or a whole body of people.
It's beautiful. And I've taken them, and I've had nothing but beautiful things happen to me ever since. And I'm much happier now, and much freer, and I love everybody.
Oh, it's been a beautiful experience the past year since I first tried LSD. It's opened my mind to accepting the different people that turn on to the different drugs, and I haven't seen any harm in any of them. I've given each one of them, you know, a little bit of my time, and it's so easy to just love everybody.
None of these mind-altering drugs has a uniform, consistent effect on people, whether you're talking about alcohol or LSD or marijuana. Therefore, the drug itself would not make people more loving or friendly, or, for that matter, more aggressive or antisocial. What happens is the drug interacts with the personality or character structure of the person taking the drug and the social setting or context in which it's taken. And it's this combination of things that we loosely call the drug effect. So depending on the already existing attitudes and values of the person taking the drug, it could have many different effects. Some people would become, let's say, more loving. Others would become less loving. Some would have a possibly beneficial experience. Others would have a possibly harmful experience.
I would assume that LSD, like many other biotics or chemicals, will have many very fine and efficacious uses for the benefit of mankind. I would say that that's probably a certainty. But it is as dangerous, more so, than dynamite or a nuclear bomb. And it shouldn't be used except under the closest supervision of the most competent authorities. Research is what is needed here.
Clearly, here as elsewhere, there is disagreement both on the dangers and possible benefits of marijuana, LSD, and other drugs. There is disagreement about how to cope with them, whether they are legal, medical, or social problems, or even whether they are problems. All agree that the use of drugs is increasing in all segments of society, but particularly among the young and among the students. Much more must be known about the effect of these drugs on the body and on the mind.
It has become virtually impossible in recent months to pick up a paper in New York and not find a story about kids using drugs. There are two reasons for this. Nothing makes a better headline than a story about a pot raid on campus. And secondly, there is the simple, undeniable fact that more young people are experimenting with drugs than ever before. This is Terrence Smith reporting for WNDT. I'm standing on St. Mark's Place in Greenwich Village. And so far as the drug scene is concerned, this is where the action is. Obviously, a devoted pothead can get his marijuana, or his LSD if that's his hang-up, almost anywhere in the metropolitan area. But nowhere is it easier than in this immediate neighborhood. This is where much of the traffic in soft drugs, and by that I mean marijuana, hashish, pep pills, or the hallucinogens, originates. It's spread out from here throughout the greater New York area, and since its audience is predominantly young, it frequently finds its way to college campuses. As a result, the use of soft drugs has become a major cause of alarm among college officials. The police at two universities, Cornell and Fairleigh Dickinson, went so far as to plant spies among the students to rat on their switched-on classmates. In the minds of many, this was going too far. But few people question the fact that the use of soft drugs, including the potent LSD, has reached unprecedented proportions. A number of doctors in New York are looking into the physiological effects of LSD. Among them is Kurt Hirschhorn, a geneticist at Mount Sinai School of Medicine.
The research derived from some findings by Dr. Maimon Cohen from the Department of Pediatrics at the State University of Buffalo, who was a geneticist there, who decided to add some LSD to cultures of human peripheral blood white cells, lymphocytes, which one can make divide in culture. When he added LSD in doses that are equivalent to those that float around in the blood after one takes a usual dose of LSD, he found that there was a high percentage of chromosome breaks and rearrangements.
And what have you discovered so far?
But we know that other agents which cause similar breaks and rearrangements, such as X-rays, certain types of viruses, and certain types of chemicals, all of which are associated either in man or in experimental animals with the production of leukemia and other tumors, that these agents are capable of producing such breaks and rearrangements. We therefore have to follow these patients for some years to see whether the production of breaks and rearrangements in them will also cause an increase of leukemia and other tumors. This is one of the potential dangers of such damage. Another problem is that we do not know whether these same breaks and rearrangements occur in the cells of these patients which produce the sperm and the egg from which their future offspring will be formed. If such damage occurs in these cells as well, then there's a possibility, number one, of great damage to the child, great enough in some cases to produce an early abortion, perhaps less great in other instances, in which case the child may be born with congenital malformations, including mental retardation, and in even some cases where the rearrangements of the chromosomes are balanced in such a way that the child that is born looks apparently normal, but itself has a potential danger of producing abnormal children.
This is Terrence Smith reporting for WNDT in New York.
Drug cult. The movement has much in common with religion, and it has in Dr. Timothy Leary, a colorful and articulate evangelist. He was interviewed in Houston by Carl Brazel of station KUHT.
Dr. Leary, how do you evaluate your influence on the increase in the use of hallucinogenic drugs by college students?
Well, I want to make it clear that I didn't invent LSD. God made LSD, the evolutionary process. LSD has been used in its plant form for thousands of years. Nor have I been a pusher or a advocate of LSD. I have been in the position of a prophet who's been pointing out to his fellow man that this was going to happen. 7, 6, 5 years ago, several of us from Harvard went down to Washington. We told the FDA, hey, listen, there's going to be an LSD boom. It can't be stopped. It's going to be used. It's going to take over. You better be ready for it. Then I'm in the unfortunate position of Cassandra, who, when the hurricane occurs, is blamed for it. Far from telling people they should take LSD, my message to young people is, since you're going to take it anyway, be careful when you take it. Take it for the right reasons. Take it in a sense of seriousness, and take it well prepared. And don't take it unless you know what you're getting into.
Do your feelings along these lines include other drugs as well as LSD? Marijuana, heroin, mescaline?
Well, there are two types of drugs. There are the down drugs, the narcotic drugs that put you in a stupor, of which heroin, the opiate derivatives, and alcohol are the prime offenders, and of course the tranquilizers and barbiturates also take you down. Then there is a large armamentarium of up drugs, of up experiences, of which marijuana is the mildest, going through mescaline, peyote, LSD. But I must point out that LSD is already somewhat old hat. There are now currently available in certain American cities and in certain chemical laboratories drugs more powerful, which last longer than LSD. This is just the beginning of a scientific and psychological breakthrough, which can't be stopped by law.
Don't you feel that it's wrong to encourage the use of these illegal drugs by college students? This is, in effect, isn't it encouraging the breaking of a law?
Well, I never tell anyone what to do with their body, because what we're talking about here is the first and last frontier of freedom, my body. Now, who touches my body, or what touches my body, or what goes into my body, that's the last and first frontier of my divinity. And I have to say to Caesar, as every religious spokesman has done for the last few thousand years, Caesar, I render unto you what belongs to you out there, in the highways and the byways and the weapons and the banks. But I reserve my right to do within my own body what feels right to me. There can be no laws about what goes on inside a person's body. And I'm engaged in several court cases right now testing the constitutionality of these laws which tell you what you can put in your body. The marijuana laws are clearly against the Constitution, against the ancient traditions of mankind. The laws against LSD will not stand up. What you can do, you can put labels on the package, and we're all in favor of the FDA and the federal government putting labels on the package. If I want to kill myself quickly with cyanide or slowly with cigarettes, fine. Let the government tell me that. Let the government put on the marijuana package the scientific evidence about marijuana. Let the government put on the booze bottle what booze does for you if they want to be concerned with public health. But they cannot pass laws and maintain laws which govern what people are going to do, particularly something pleasant and something revelatory and something educational like LSD. Why are 10 million Americans smoking marijuana today? I mean, these are not criminals, they're not dope fiends. Matter of fact, they come from your best colleges, and they're your most effective people. The latest statistic is that 70% of the freshman class at Harvard smoke marijuana. Now, that's my old alma mater, and I don't want to boast, but that's the sign of the times. You just can't stop intelligent, thoughtful people from doing something that feels good and right to them.
One final question, Dr. Leary. How would you explain, or how do you explain, the rather unconventional attire that you have on at this time?
Unconventional? My dear Carl, this is the most orthodox attire that a man can wear. What you're wearing, a tie and that funny suit, is that's a fad. That's only been around for 20 or 30 years. I'm wearing the ancient garb of my profession, which is prophet, which is part-time would-be holy man. I'm the orthodox person. You know, as Alan Watts says, there's nothing as far out as a square. Just look at the way he acts and dresses.
In Washington, we talk with some of the people who administer and enforce the laws which Dr. Leary dislikes. These government officials say they are worried about the drug vogue.
This is John Davenport of station WETA, Washington, D.C. In true bureaucratic fashion, the problem of drug abuse, as seen from here, is handled by two agencies, the Food and Drug Administration and the Federal Narcotics Bureau. The Narcotics Bureau enforces laws against possession of marijuana and the so-called hard drugs, such as heroin. The Food and Drug Administration concerns itself with LSD and the so-called dangerous drugs, such as pep pills and goofballs. Food and Drug implies that it has a more enlightened approach, concentrating on public education about drug abuse and enforcing the laws against the illegal supplier and manufacturer. FDA claims it's not out to make a criminal of the user. Its administrator is Dr. James Goddard, the first medical doctor to head that organization.
Our job is to really do three things. First of all, we want to provide good information, an educational program. Secondly, we need to carry out research. Why do people wish to withdraw? Understanding that might give us a better basis upon which we could build a good educational activity. And third is the enforcement. And there, as I said, we are interested in seeking out the illegal sources of supply and bringing them to justice rather than the individual users.
Patrick O'Carroll, veteran federal narcotics agent, says the stories on how the Federal Narcotics Bureau operates are sometimes untrue.
Well, I think this is the most important aspect of any discussion on marijuana. There does seem to be a great amount of misinformation or inaccurate statements in regard to marijuana. And we in the Bureau of Narcotics, or we in the enforcement community, have been accused of telling horror stories about marijuana that are not true. Now, I think it's important to point out, because this is where the misinformation and where the inaccuracies begin, that there is nothing inherent in a marijuana cigarette that will cause a person to begin using heroin and injecting himself with a needle. It isn't the marijuana as such that causes this transition. At least this has never been documented. What does cause it is this involvement in the drug culture or the subculture of a person, and he begins with marijuana, which is quite easy to take and to smoke. It's something that he's done before. And once he becomes involved with this drug culture, his whole life changes.
Our overall impression from this survey is one not so much of blacks and whites as of various shades of gray. It may be anomalous that marijuana, which is illegal, is less harmful than alcohol or tobacco, which are not illegal. The recent report of the President's Crime Commission is surprisingly open-minded on the subject. Even Dr. Leary would agree that LSD presents more serious problems. The pot smoker is a pleasure seeker, but the LSD user professes higher motives, ranging from the liberation of the individual to the salvation of the world. At the same time, a bad trip can be disastrous. Several recent studies now have tentatively linked LSD with genetic damage and leukemia. The whole subject is so new that research is scarcely begun. The psychedelic people claim that theirs is the real world, that the straight or square world is unreal. Be that as it may, and for better or for worse, the evidence is overwhelming that in terms of the number of people involved, especially young people, the psychedelic world is growing and growing rapidly. Good evening.
educational television network.
And is now the preeminent home of the hippies, San Francisco.
Free! I'm free! We're not slaves! We're not slaves! I ain't got a dirty heart, I'm a clean bean!
Bless your dirty heart!
You
talk about freedom with no responsibility! You talk about love with no obligation! You get fined! You turn on when you get fined! You get Jesus Christ and you turn on! You have turned society off and the world off! You need Christ and turn on! Thank God I've been turned off! I'm turned on and tuned in!
In California, marijuana arrests among juveniles were up 140% last year. 25,000 adults were arrested for taking illegal drugs. Despite stricter enforcement, more rigid laws, and more rigid attitudes on the part of the...
At all toward nonconformity, it will manifest itself under the influence of the drug. So that if the group or if the individual feels a tendency to be promiscuous in sex, any reservations that they had about it are dropped while under the influence of the drug. This is particularly true in the case of marijuana. This is a kilo brick of marijuana. It's 2 2/10 pounds, and we were paying $225 in 1965 per kilo. This is a portion of a kilo now. We're paying $80 a kilo in 1967.
I can't see anything wrong with it at all. I know it's not physically harmful, and I never put the drug down. The drug, I couldn't call it a drug. It's just a weed because people call it a weed. It's put here on God's planet. It's put here for everybody.
There is a large supply, and it's the old situation of supply and demand. These are marijuana cigarettes. They're frequently referred to as joints, reefers, sticks.
Good evening. The pot and psychedelic cult, whatever else it may be, is new and different. Unlike the nihilist beatniks of a few years back, today's LSD cultists say that they are turned on, not turned off. And if they talk of dropping out, they do so because they reject square society and claim they can build a better one. The psychedelic people are not in the historic pattern of dope addiction. Their drugs are so-called head drugs, ranging from such natural substances as marijuana and hashish to LSD and other artificial concoctions. These head drugs are not physically addictive, as are such body drugs as opium, heroin, and alcohol. An LSD enthusiast will inveigh against liquor as fervently as a 19th century temperance crusader. But some doctors and scientists claim that pot and LSD not only can lead to addictive drugs, but can be dangerous in themselves. In the next hour, we'll hear many sides of the controversy from 8 American cities. First, the city which has been identified with so many new movements.
The use of drugs in California is increasing, both on and off the campus. In the past 7 years, marijuana arrests have increased by 248%. Dangerous drug arrests, including LSD, are up 84%. Why? More people are using drugs. LSD, marijuana, tobacco, and alcohol. Tobacco causes cancer. Alcohol, taken to excess, damages the brain and kidneys. They are legal, marijuana and LSD are not. I am Mel Wax, KQED in San Francisco. Here in San Francisco and in nearby Berkeley, in fraternity and sorority houses, marijuana is used, both by conforming students and by student rebels. It is used by hippies in the Haight-Ashbury district. It is smoked in cigarettes, pipes, Turkish hookahs. It is sprinkled on salads, used as seasoning in soup, and mixed in chocolate chip cookies, even in the imposing Victorian homes of Pacific Heights.
Well, there's a physiological effect and there's a psychological effect. It seems to speed up their blood count. The pupil of the eye becomes dilated. The white of the eye becomes bloodshot. The person then becomes intoxicated. Their moods or their feelings are exaggerated. People that use marijuana have a tendency to be gregarious, and they do it in the company of each other.
Matthew O'Connor is a former undercover narcotics agent who is now in charge of the San Francisco office of the California State Bureau of Narcotics Enforcement.
The exaggerated mood of the gay atmosphere of the party seems to exist. If they have had any feeling